Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of SmugMug Live. Thank you so much for joining today. This is episode 42 and we're going to be joined in a few moments by the incredible Easton Chang. But as always, this is my moment to ask you to do me some favours and support the channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell notification. That way you'll be notified whenever we release a new episode here on SmugMug Films YouTube channel. And of course, if you're enjoying watching the stream, give it a little like during today's chat. And as always, there's a couple of things you can do. Give yourself a shout out in the chat window. I already see some of you doing that. Thank you for joining. Give yourself a shout out. Let me know what part of the world you're joining from. That's always exciting to see. And if you have questions today at any point for our guest, post those in the chat window and I will feed them to Easton. You can help me by posting a question, but when you post the question, start the question with the word question. That way I can find it easily within the chat. SmugMug Live, as always, is brought to you by SmugMug and Flickr. I'm your host, Alistair Jolly. If you're looking for somewhere to showcase and share your work, if you're looking to store your images online, or indeed if you're looking for an e-commerce solution to sell your images to your clients and customers, then check out everything we have to offer at smugmug.com. Or if you're looking to connect with photographers, be part of a great community, be inspired and motivated, then check out flickr.com. So that's all you updates from me. This is the last episode of the day, of the week, sorry. And we'll be doing some more episodes next week. You can stay tuned on what we have coming either by following the notifications here on the YouTube channel or checking out the schedule we have on our SmugMug blog. Let's see if our guest is with us yet, because Easton is joining us all the way from Sydney, Australia, where I believe it's just gone 5 a.m. in the morning. Good morning, Easton. How are you?
Good morning.
It is 5 a.m., Easton. Thank you so much. Why are you joining me at 5 a.m. in the morning?
Because it suits your audience.
It suits a global audience to have you up super early. It's late for me in the evening here in Scotland, and hopefully most of America is awake. So hopefully we cover the whole globe with this. Maybe not so many Australians awake watching this, but they can rewatch it once the day starts. So yeah, you're just outside Sydney, is that right?
Yeah, about 2 hours outside of Sydney in a place called Newcastle, but the time zone's the same all along most of the east coast of Australia.
Yeah, and
I'd be very impressed if you have viewers from Australia tuned in right now as well. So I'd prioritise their questions if they're getting up at 5 a.m. like me to answer these.
Yeah, we've got a few in there. We've got JK's Adventures joining us from Portland in Oregon, and James is joining us from Canyon Lake in California. Ira is joining. She says hello from San Francisco. So yeah, we've definitely got a lot of West Coast America in the chat at the moment. The rest of you can give yourselves a shout out once you feel like doing that. But how are you going to wake yourself up? Have you got some snacks and goodies there with you this morning?
I've got some canned coffee.
Canned coffee.
Just to get me ready. And my girlfriend got me some donuts ready as well, just in case I need a sugar hit.
Oh my God, you're spoiled. I don't get any of that.
Yeah, isn't she lovely?
That's good. I definitely don't have canned coffee. I don't think that's a thing here, but
I should do these Q&As all the time. Then she'll always buy me donuts.
No, it'll wear off very, very quickly. After the first week, no more donuts. And it'd be super unhealthy too.
It's a good excuse for me, though.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got Ramez is joining us from Amman in Jordan, where he says it's 10 a.m. Hi, Ramez. And then we've got Daryl joining us from Indiana. Hey, Daryl. Nice to meet you. So what does canned coffee taste like? Just cold coffee? Is that?
This one's not too bad. This one's it's got enough sugar in it to help wake me up. So it took me a while to find one to settle down to. It's just too early for me to go to a coffee shop and get anything at the moment.
Right. Well, I think the name on that can says it all. There's a few folk in the channel that think you are the boss when it comes to what you do, and I thoroughly agree. For those that don't know what you do, how would you describe the photography you do for a living?
I just shoot cars, and I've always shot cars. I don't really shoot much of anything else. I have shot anything that's related, well, anything that clients will hire me for, I'd be happy to shoot. But I think I'm generally known for photographing anything that is regarded as boys' toys. So I've photographed planes and jets as well, but I've photographed big machinery too, and I love shooting anything that I think the common theme is boys' toys and any kind of machinery that elicits emotion, I think, because that's something that's very unique to photographing cars, because it's almost the opposite of photographing a white appliance. You're photographing something that people don't necessarily need. So you're selling something based on emotion. You're selling aspirational products, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't spend a lot of time looking at a photograph of a fridge, even though we need one. But
Yeah, exactly.
we will spend time looking at your portfolio and just dreaming about owning some of these vehicles, right?
Yeah, the brands that you work for, cars is all about photos. It's all about selling an aspirational lifestyle. So, whether it's a jet or a boat or, machinery, it's something that you're selling to a client as an aspirational lifestyle. It's the opposite of being a fridge, even though some cars can be essentially just a white appliance on wheels. No manufacturer ever, or no brand ever, wants to sell or pitch their car to their customers like it's a white appliance. They always want to sell that aspirational lifestyle. So whether it's, even if it's not a Ferrari or an Aston Martin, you're still selling your independence for a college student's first runabout car or a family's getaway pickup truck.
Yeah.
Or your work vehicle. You're always selling, even if it's not a super sporty car, you're still selling aspirational lifestyle. Whether the car needs to look cute, whether the car needs to look boxy, or it needs to look fast or aggressive, that's what you're selling. You're always selling that emotional aspect to it, and that's why I think what's unique to the car photography industry is that you really are selling something that's very important. That's why photography is always going to be so important in industries like the car industry, because everyone wants that individualism. Everyone wants to be separated from the rest, and it's never going to be, hopefully it's never going to be in a society where cars are just appliances where you go from A to B. They're always going to be more than that. They're always going to elicit an emotional response from people.
Yeah, I've owned a few fridges in my time, I must admit. Yeah, not all my cars, in fact, most of my cars have not been aspirational. That's for sure. I wish they had been. Before we continue with our conversation, we were very fortunate. We're delighted and humbled that Easton is a SmugMug customer, and his website is based on our platform. But a few years ago, like 3 years ago now, we got to work together with Easton to make one of our SmugMug films, which was a real treat. And I'm going to play the trailer for it just now. There's no point playing the whole film because you can go watch it here on the channel once you've finished listening to this episode of SmugMug Live. I'll play the trailer. Obviously, the trailer says coming soon, 2017, but it is released now, and you can watch that at your leisure. So here's the trailer for Easton's SmugMug film.
Cars are much more than just being an inanimate object to us car enthusiasts. It's the culture, it's the lifestyle, it's the people. It's a way of life.
So that was the trailer for your film. Good memories, huh?
Yeah, I back when yeah, that was great. Back when I could actually travel and go to the United States as well.
Yeah, ditto. But that was spent some time with you in the Mojave Desert making that film, so hopefully that's teased you when you're watching to go see the full film and get a bit of an insight into Easton actually working. We made that film in collaboration, as it said there, with Pro EDU, where you have a tutorial, right, that showcases in depth what you do.
Yeah, it was a massive week. I couldn't get over the sheer amount of hours they extract out of you as an instructor on the Pro EDU tutorial. Like it's I've done some educational stuff before, but nothing of that caliber. Like it's going straight in the deep end when you're doing something with the Pro EDU guys. They really whip as much time out of you as you possibly can. I think there was like a total of 40 hours of non-stop filming over the course of just a couple of days, I think. So and they hardly cut or cull much of that either. And then I came back and they gave me this microphone so I could do everything all over again with retouching.
Right, with the actual post-production of those images.
Which is also just as, if
just
not
as
even more important when it comes to car photography.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can talk about some of that as we go through the next hour, or the next 50 minutes or so. The way we're going to do this, we're going to actually look at your website and talk about some of your work, and we can discuss those images. And I'd really love to feed this conversation off the questions that we get in the channel. And I know there's already comments about hoping that you'll share. JK asks, now this will be a good one. Easton is a master. Hopefully he can share some great tips on capturing vehicles during a race. Do you do a lot of race work? Or
No? I think, geez, my best advice with that is that motorsport is such a specialized niche within car photography. I mean, if car photography is a niche in its own right, motorsport is like a sub niche of that niche. People who are really good at motorsport, like I have huge admiration for what they do. Like, for instance, Larry Chen is an absolute legend.
Phenomenal. As
the motorsport guy. Like, at the moment, he's the motorsport guy. So, and the stuff that he does is just so different to what I do. So I met him during that week. We were out there doing the Pro EDU tutorial, and we exchanged and talked about a lot of things. And like it's very evident that what we do is very, very different. Motorsport is in itself a niche. You do need to have some skills photographing cars on the track. I've had to do a lot of that from my editorial days, but it doesn't comprise of a very large percentage of what you do in your portfolio in comparison to a motorsport photographer.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Larry's work. It's absolutely phenomenal, and he's also a SmugMug customer. So here's what I actually hope to do: an episode on motorsport specifically. I've got a couple of people in mind for that. Both of them are a little bit hesitant to do live shows. They love photographing race cars, but they're not so keen on public speaking. One of them's
maybe they're a little hard of hearing by the stage.
Yeah, maybe. But one that comes to mind, a dear friend of ours and SmugMug ambassador, John Rourke, is he's currently in Le Mans, photographing Le Mans 22.4 at the moment. He's the official photographer for the FIA. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have more specific motorsport racing photographers if we can. But your work I would describe as probably more kind of lifestyle, right? Kind of commercial, automotive lifestyle.
In contrast to motorsport, I would certainly call it more choreographed.
Yeah,
that's the biggest difference photographically between motorsport and what I do. Motorsport, you have no control over your environment. It's all about being as good as you can at capturing what's occurring around you. Whereas what I do, the stark difference is that it's all about being choreographed environments in locations that, well, not 100% choreographed all the time. It depends, but much more so choreographed. It's locations that you choose. It's locations that you go to. You control the car, and for the most part, you control the lighting as well.
Who's Easton's clients? Who are you typically photographing, and how do you make a living out of this? Who are you photographing these images for? Is it the manufacturers? Is it magazines? Is it who's the client?
So the first and foremost, I would say the bread and butter clients would be agencies. When it comes to most car photography work, the brands outsource it to advertising agencies and PR agencies. These days, digital agencies, social media agencies, they generally outsource the photography to the clients. The clients sometimes for some work also will source photographers directly too. But I would say that the meat of it is going to be advertising agencies.
Yeah, most of the images ultimately for ads for the cars, right? Whether it's in on screen, media, press, brochures, and those are huge projects that have many facets to them. So the manufacturer will outsource that to an ad agency to manage all those different bits.
Because it's more complicated than just outsourcing a photographer. You have to come up with the concepts as well, and you need to go to the drawing board and go back and forth with all the headaches and complications of production from both the agency side as well as the photographer side, filmmaking, as well as the media buy as well.
Yeah, where it's going to live, where these images are going to live. When you're on one of these projects, who at the ad agency would you typically be working with? Is there an art director or someone like that?
Yeah, so like in the magazine world, which I used to do a lot more of in the earlier days of my career, you would work with an art director or a photo editor. But in the ad agency world, you work with art directors as well, but mostly with creative directors.
Right. And how did you said there you did a lot more of it, but how did you get started? How did you get into this?
So,
was it just a love of cars and a passion?
Yeah, I hope everyone's got a coffee. That's a long story.
Get your coffee out.
So I've always been into cars. I bought my first car was this Honda Integra Type R in America. They call them Acura Integra Type Rs, and I still have it. Like 19 years later.
I saw an image you posted recently of then and now, and you still have it. That's incredible.
I still have it. So next year I'll be able to do a 20-year gap photo because that's how long I've had that car for. But I remember that long ago I was on all the internet forums because I was a car person first and foremost, and on these JDM car forums, some people were uploading their photos of their sweet rides on these things called digital cameras, and I was using my mum's crappy little film camera. That I was also very impatient to seeing the photos as well. I love that instant gratification of shooting digital, and the photos that were coming out of these digital cameras were so superior to the scans. So I made it my mission to save up and to buy a digital camera, and I did. It was a little PowerShot S45. I think I waited until the PowerShot S45 version just came out, and that was my first camera. And I was so into it, and I was so into photographing my car that I was filling out writable CDs every day just from taking pictures all the time, shooting my sweet ride and shooting my friends' rides. And I shot a taco image that ended up sort of blowing up a little bit at the time. And it was, it all started from there. I always kind of had a passion for it there. So I was doing software engineering at university at the time, and so I was doing photography as a passion project on the side. But I remember being really frustrated that the pictures I was taking on the back of my camera, although they were better than what I was taking on film, even though it looked better, it didn't quite match what I was seeing in real life. I remember being frustrated that I would see this awesome sunset, for instance, and the car just had this great yellow pop to it and rich, vibrant colors in the sunset on the skies. And I would take the picture, and then when I would look at the picture on the back of my camera, the skies were blown out, the car was too dark, or the yellow was like off. So I remember that I wanted to learned how to match the quality of the images on the camera to what I was seeing in real life. And so that's when I learned Photoshop, and I was tinkering around with it whilst I was simultaneously learning how camera settings work as well. And slowly but surely, I learned to edit the picture in such a way that it would look better and more contrasty and more closely matched to what I was seeing in real life. But the thing is, once you learn those techniques, and it reaches the point where it matches real life, there's nothing there to stop you from pushing it even further and making it look even more contrasty, and the sky's even more deeper and the car even more yellow than what real life was. Like once you've gotten those tricks up your sleeves, you can sort of, I guess the word is abuse and exploit your newfound knowledge. And so, you immediately try to take your images up to the next level. And car photography, the trends have come and gone. But at the time, people really wanted very deep, rich, contrasty, colorful images, which is a little bit in contrast to how things are today. But back then, we're just moving into digital, and people wanted to see how poppy and contrasty we can get these colored images. And so that was all the rage back then. And so I was making my images look as pop out as much and vibrant and contrasty as possible, especially since 99% of the time the ultimate final layout these images people's photographies normally go on is print, whether it's in a photo album or in a magazine. And in magazines, you've got to have the pictures look as vibrant and bright as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how did you take that passion and all those skills you've learned and convert it into a job? When did you get your first gig?
Job, I think it was about another year later. I was really into what I was doing, but I was still shooting with my point and shoot PowerShot S45. And I thought, I need to get myself a pro camera, because my friends and my family were all sort of encouraging me to go out there and, reach out to magazines. Like the holy grail of what we wanted to do as a car photographer was to work for the car magazines. Yeah, to work for the car magazines that I grew up, reading and looking at and admiring the photography. Like, it was a dream to do something like that. And I remember that I was so shy about it that I remember I did not approach any of my favorite magazines first. I approached I don't know how else to say it, but I approached the lesser magazines first, because I didn't want to get my hopes up. I kind of thought, well, the natural progression is you work for the lesser expectation magazines first, and then you work your way up to the top, right?
Right.
So I ended up spending 9 months running around chasing magazines, and I only ever got one meeting with a magazine.
Right.
And I remember showing up with my portfolio, and the portfolio was just prints of my Integra Type R and almost nothing but my Integra Type R.
I'm really good at photographing yellow cars.
Yeah, exactly. I had that, and I had, just for diversity, I had like one shot of a friend of a friend's Astra with deep dish chrome wheels. And I had a couple of shots of my friend who was assisting me at the time, my best friend's V20 Toyota Camry from like the late 80s, early 90s. And that was
your portfolio?
That was a fridge. That was like a white, your basic white fridge appliance. That was as bad of a car as you can possibly get. But I was experimenting with rig shots at the time, which in an editorial basis nobody was really doing. So I was running out to Bunnings, which is like our Home Depot, and getting bits of aluminium and clamps and this and that, and experimenting on this old late 80s Toyota Camry, getting these sick rolling rig shots around the car park. And so these sick rolling rig shots of this basic white Camry was comprised in my portfolio, and I was showing to the art director at the time. And ironically, none of the small magazines wanted to have anything to do with me. And as I was starting to give up, because I think I was gonna only ask like one or two magazines, and then I was just gonna be like, yeah, no, look, this thing's just not for me. My work obviously isn't good enough.
You were going to move on.
I was going to move on. Yeah, I was just going to go back and just focus on my degree and finish that and just do that for the rest of my life. So I remember going to probably what was my last magazine, and the very last magazines I tried were my favorite magazines. And there was a magazine called Speed Magazine, and it was my favorite modified magazine at the time. Sadly, the magazine doesn't run anymore, but the editor, he looked up my work and he gave me an opportunity. And it's just a funny story in that when you go for those more, what you think is more accessible magazines and clients, they didn't give me the opportunity, but they didn't appreciate it. And the big magazines, the ones that you feel like, they're inaccessible, the ones that you feel like you have to work your way up to, they're the ones that, they have their eyes open, and they were willing to give someone a go, and they were willing to I guess what it told me was that's the reason why they are the editors of these magazines and the art directors of these magazines, because they are looking for the talent. They are looking for more than just the name. And that extends to my first or one of my major, I'd say my first major commercial shoot for a brand was, I'm not going to drop names and stuff like that, but it was one where the art director, the creative director, was his second attempt at getting me on board on doing this shoot. And I remember that client bias of names was still such a major hurdle for me to get around. Nobody had heard of Easton Chang. So what he did was, when he did like a pitch to multiple photographers, he actually gave each of us aliases when it came to the mood boards that he would show in his meetings to clients. So he would show the photographers from photographer A through to photographer F, and he assigned me to, just to a random letter. And so that way, when the client was looking at the mood board and had to choose the photographer, there would be no existing bias based on the names. It would just be based on their work entirely, and that's how I got my first break.
That's pretty cool. I think it's time we should show some of this amazing work. I'm sure people are itching to see some of it. So I'm going to get you to share your screen, and we can kind of just pick through some images. I've got some questions in here which we can get to as well. We have a hard stop today at the top of the hour, so I'm keen to get to some images and talk through some of those. So let's see. Yep. So we can see your screen at the moment. And this is your kind of portfolio page on your website. And I reckon we should just pick some images and talk about them.
On my SmugMug website, I've got it's hard to sort of segment how you might want to do your car gallery, but I always have for my portfolio just my current images that I like looking at the moment.
Yeah.
At the moment, I really am happy to have photographed Lewis Hamilton. That was super cool. So obviously, straight to my portfolio.
Absolutely.
Lewis Hamilton in an EQS concept car. That was out in Melbourne, and this was actually the very last shoot before lockdown in Australia. This was just before the Formula One race was going to start, which ended up being just before the Formula One race was cancelled this year.
That should have been the first race of the season, right, in Melbourne?
Yeah, that's right.
So they all had went out there for the race, and then it got cancelled just before it kicked off. So when did you do this? Just on the lead up to the race?
Yeah, the weekdays leading up to the weekend. So luckily we got the shots done, because as soon as our shoot was finished, we were on the plane bailing out of there, and we got news that the Formula One was cancelled.
I have a million questions about Lewis, but I know contractually we can't go there. But I'm assuming he's
great.
a
He's
cool
so
guy, right?
Chill. He's an awesome guy. I had
Yeah.
a great time working with him.
Yeah, and the car's a concept, but is it a working concept?
Yeah, yeah, it was a
Yeah.
working concept, absolutely. He was driving the car all over. They were actually shooting. It was a TVC shoot, so it was like a TV commercial. And as a photographer, I was essentially piggybacking off the TV commercial production.
Hmm.
So it wasn't, like multiple days of just me
Just you and
having
Lewis hanging
a
out.
monopoly of the car, of the concept car in Lewis. I wish it was like that, but the reality, it's not. And that's something that I think a lot of people get. Like it's like a misconception in car photography, in all genres of photography. I guess a lot of people look at these photos and they think, oh, I wish I, had a monopoly of this location and this car and this driver and beautiful weather. But the reality is, even for these larger, cooler jobs, you got to be very run and gun, and you got to be very resourceful. And a lot of it's just being able to pull up together what you can at the time. None of this was planned. We just ran out there and we just shot what we could, based on what we had available, because this was ultimately a TVC shoot, and we were just piggybacking to get whatever we possibly could out of it.
That last shot you had there, where you were inside the car, was that a moving shot, or was
No, so
no,
because
still?
the background actually had a tower there just to show and indicate that we weren't moving. So what I did was, because I wanted to have a wide enough shot, I had actually opened the door, because I think the DP was doing a lens change or something along those lines. He was actually hidden in the back seat. And whilst he was doing that, I was like, look, could I grab a really quick shot of Lewis in the driver's seat while you do that? So I had opened the passenger door and I just framed it up so you couldn't see the DP. And I took a low enough shot so you couldn't see the trees in the background. And then that way I knew in post I could retouch the tower out from the background. And then you wouldn't be able to tell whether the car is driving, moving, or not. Just so that way.
Just asked Lewis the kid on he was driving.
Yeah, that's right.
Concentrate. It's
Just
cool.
pretend you're doing a final lap.
Yeah, it's a great shot. I'm assuming it's an electric concept.
Yes, the EQS electric concept car.
So this is the same car, but is it a different shoot? Different time.
This was it was on a different day. I think this was the very first morning of the very first day of shooting, and I remember they were getting the Scorpion arm, Russian arm. They call it different things around the world, but it's basically that big blacked out SUV with the big camera with the big boom that hangs out
Big
from those
Steadicam.
cars, from those big commercials and Hollywood productions. So they were having that ready on the road, and they were closing roads in along the Victorian coast. And whilst they were doing that, this car was basically just sitting there getting ready. And obviously, as a photographer, we can work under more varying light conditions. So I just photographed it as it was right there. I mean, I'm glad I did, because halfway through shooting, the car just had to drive off and go and do its laps for the TV commercial, the TV production. So that was like one of my only opportunities to shoot the car before the light fully changed and went up, and you couldn't see the headlights and the glowing LEDs anymore.
That's awesome car. Can't wait to get one. When you're not this jobs, these are obviously TVCs, as you said, where you're working within the constraints of them making a commercial or an ad. But when you're got the commission from an ad agency to get specific images, you then obviously, I'm assuming, have much more control over placement, what the car's doing, when it's doing, when it's specific.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're doing something with with a look, it can vary. Even large jobs with ad agencies, often it works where stills production is piggybacking off TVC production,
Right.
simply because if the TVC production has already spent all the money on location and first of all, it's economically efficient to piggyback stills off TVC production from their point of view sometimes, but also creatively, you want to piggyback as well, because if you think if they're doing a a consistent campaign with the launch of a vehicle, then the stills needs to be consistent with what TVC is doing, or
Gotta
vice
have the
versa.
same look. Yeah.
That's right. So if they're going to spend a lot of money having, for instance, a campaign where there's a whole bunch of hot air balloons in the background or something, well, then when they have that done and produced for TVC, it only makes sense to have the photography done at the same time too.
Yeah. Do you have images of shoots where it's just been you with control?
Yeah. With the examples is in contrast to the Mercedes EQS, this is one of my favorite productions. I had full control over this. This is, car photography varies, where you might shoot hundreds of shots in a day to only photographing one shot or layout, we would kind of call it, or a key visual per day, just because the amount of work and setup and scrutiny involved is just massive in preparation for a shot. And I remember shooting this one in Thailand, and it was the only time, I don't think it'll ever happen again, but it was the only time I was on a shoot where we essentially had like a casting call on elephants, on Asian elephants on the shoot. And it was the first time I got to sort of hold a megaphone and say, all right, bring on the elephant.
So this isn't CGI. This is.
It was very anticlimactic, because you just you say that, and then because they've been sort of prepared around the corner for so long, and then you say that, and then you're waiting for 5 minutes before you see your first elephant, because they are animals at the end of the day. But this in stark contrast to to the EQC. This is one where it's fully my production. There was a TVC production of this as well, but it ended up being completely separate, being done in a completely different part of the world.
So talk us through this image. It's not CGI then. If you actually have a casting call for elephants, is it a composite or is it?
Oh yeah. It's a complex composite. We had a retouching studio in Los Angeles stitch this together, and but I guess this is a choice that different car photographers make based on their own individual preferences and circumstances. But for me, I like to try to get as much in camera as possible, and at least within what the realm of reality and possibility is. Mm-hmm. I think we had 8 elephants, and I think we multiplied and duplicated them, just simply having them move, doing their lap, and we just composited them by just using the different exposures, where we had them moving from the back of the car through to the front of the car. But of course we had the riders with them, and we photographed them with and without the riders, just so that the retouchers had as much option as possible to retouch them out. Yeah.
And I guess it's the overall concept is showing the power of the Fort Everest. I guess that's the whole concept there.
Yeah, we photographed the water splashes and the white water, the movement, everything separately. This was a really, really complex layout.
Awesome. I know there's going to be a lot of interest in the gear that you use. You've already mentioned early in your career that you started visiting Home Depot and building your own rigs. Do you have an example of a rig shot that and talk us through the process of?
Find an early rig shot if I can. So this here is what we call a virtual rig.
Right.
So we don't generally do real rigs anymore, because if you can just do it in post, there's a lot more freedom and flexibility. The issue with rigs at the time was rigs were limited by the length of the boom that you could essentially attach to the car.
Yep.
So the big advertising agencies had massive booms that would go up to 9, 11, 12 or more meters. Your little DIY booms, and even the advertising booms that they had in Australia were much more limited. So once you could do it in post, the software that had started coming out over the years where you could do it in post almost as good, especially during the day. It's different at night. Then the production advantages of doing it in post is much better.
Yep.
For instance, if you're doing a real rig shot, you might spend, I remember I would used to try and allocate maybe 2 hours at least on a shoot where you had to be reasonably efficient with time. Maybe 2 hours to do a rig shot, just to position the car, set it up. You obviously need a monopoly of the location as well, so that you're not blocking traffic with the big boom coming out, and then getting the rig shot and getting a good number of options and variety of motion blur and exposures, and also getting some clean shots of the bonnet or wherever you're hanging the boom out of as well to sort of help with retouching it out later. But with virtual rig, you sort of migrate most of that work to post-processing. So the advantage of virtual rig is that you can have the car there and you can just shoot it really, really quickly, and you can shoot it at various multiple angles. And then the client can say, hey, we like image 10671. That's the angle that we want to do. And then you spend your time, might take you 2 hours in post to actually convert it into that virtual rig shot. So from the client point of view, it's really, really advantageous because they've got that freedom and flexibility to select the final angle in hindsight, as well as giving you control of how much motion blur they want. Because if they wanted a version where the blur is a little bit stronger or a little bit weaker, you can do that in post.
When we talk about rig shots, it's it's the image a lot of people have when you think of automotive photography is these big rigs attached to the car. What is that visual that you're actually trying to do? What is it that rig and in this case virtual rig, what is it does to the image?
It's essentially like a big selfie stick for the car. That's the best term I've heard people use for to describe it these days, because you've essentially just got a big boom that comes out from the vehicle, attached in whatever way, and the camera held on the end of it pointing back at the car with a long exposure. So it's essentially like it's tripoded down to the car, and then the vehicle is moved very, very slowly to minimize vibration, so the car remains as sharp as possible whilst the wheels in the background spin. So rig shots can be like 30 seconds even. So that's how slow the car is moving. The slower it's moving, then the smoother and therefore the less motion blur you inhibit on the car, because you want the car to be as sharp as possible. But back when rig shots were all the rage, selfie sticks didn't exist, so nobody really called it selfie sticks for cars.
Yeah.
Back then, until more recently, when selfie sticks actually became a thing. But now rigs are rightfully so used much more subtly. In the past, rigs were so in trend in car photography that people would sort of figure it out and sort of Home Depot their own rigs at home eventually. And the way I would describe it is they're essentially bolting a camera to the car, and then they just do circles in laps and circles around their local car park. So you've got that super abstract motion blur in the background. And I was very careful at the time not to do rig shots that way, because I knew it would go out of style really, really fast. Like once that trend disappears, people will get sick of that look really, really quickly. Yeah. So I made it very much of my mission at the time to try to do as meaningful rig shots as possible, so that there was as much context to it as possible, and not just an abstract, cool photographic effect motion blur. And that's what happens as trends come and go. Rig shots are still very, very important in car photography, but you certainly can't just rely on a rig shot for its novelty effect anymore. Yeah, it needs to be a great photo in its own right. Just the rig is only there for the purpose of helping you implement it.
Yeah. This is maybe a great image, and you've probably answered a lot of this, but there's a couple of great questions came in. GK's Adventures asked a question, sure you'll get into, but how do you show a sense of speed with a static car? So you just mentioned that these cars are moving, especially with traditional rig shots, moving very, very slowly so that they're as sharp as possible. So what is needed to give that sense of speed, in your opinion, in a static car or very slow moving car?
So the different ways traditional ways that car photographers would create dynamic images of cars. Rigs is really much more on the far complex end of the spectrum to start with. So in a traditional rig shot, the vehicle's moving very slowly, as we talked about. In a virtual rig shot where you do it in post, it's photographed static. And you just get clean back plates that you can run through the software to control the vectors of where the motion blur is going to be going. The wheels you try to capture in camera, if you can, as close to the final angle as possible. In this case, obviously, this ended up being a billboard shot, so it ended up being shot extremely wide. It was like a 215 megapixel stitch. And we had the luxury of a little bit more time and a monopoly of the location. So we jacked up the car and we got exposures of the wheels spinning at different rates and comped the whole thing together. But usually, on a slightly less complex method, you would do rolling shots or car-to-car tracking shots, we call in Australia, where you would be hanging out of one vehicle and photographing the other vehicle in motion. I'll show an example.
Yeah, but just before you move off that one, So just to clarify, that car is actually still the main body of the car.
Static.
Yeah. Yep. So the sense of motion is purely in the process and the compositing of the moving wheels and the effect on the landscape and the track. Yeah.
Yep. That's right.
Hopefully it gives you some insight into that. Before you move on, unless you wanted to continue your thought about showing.
Oh, just an example of a tracking shot. This is a tracking shot that I like at the moment. So this wasn't a rig shot. Obviously, we couldn't close the harbour bridge, the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
You can. I thought you had that power, Easton.
Well, I don't. But maybe you do. So this was just hanging out of a car and just run and gun.
What car is that?
That's a Lotus.
That's a Lotus, yeah.
Lotus Exige.
Yeah.
410, so it's the V6 Exige.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful car. You mentioned about rig shots being, some of those rig shots being on trend at the time, but the trend moves a lot. Ramiro asked this question. He says, greetings from Belgium. Recently graduated photography student specialising in automotive. Where would you advise one should focus on most, and how do you recognise a trend that's coming up?
Well, that's a good question. That's a really, really good question.
Let's remember it's just gone, he's been up at 5 a.m. So
yeah, it's a really good question. I'm not sure my brain is functioning that well at the moment. I can answer. I think the best advice I can give him is to look at and admire and to draw inspiration from the best shots of cars that you see online, whether it's on Instagram or it's in my case at the time was looking at the top advertising photographs in the world at the time. If you especially look at the images that come out of the core cities, the core regions for the automotive industry, like Detroit, Shanghai, Tokyo, Germany especially, and look at the images that they produce, because the top agencies and the top photographers, they're the trendsetters. They're the ones who experiment and have the production and the budget to experiment and to realize and implement these wild ideas and these new wild trends. They're the ones who, they're an industry where they have no tolerance or very little tolerance for old trends or things that are boring, because if you're selling a new car and they're putting a lot of money behind it, as we said before, they're creating aspirational images of emotional objects. So they spare no expense on the creative aspect of things, and that's an excellent source of inspiration of seeing where trends are going. I remember, being in some of the top agencies around the world as I traveled, and you look at their mood boards in their offices, and those mood boards tell you a lot about what's coming and what they are wanting to do for their brands at the time.
Yeah, and it's very similar in many genres of photography, not just automotive. The fashion world, portraiture, the trend and the look is changing all the time, and ultimately you have to keep up with that, but looking at the client base that you want to shoot for, and continuing to see where their trends, the direction that's moving in, and try and just be slightly ahead of that curve, I guess, is the ideal spot. A few other comments coming in here. Lovely comment from a man. He says, "OMG, it's Easton. Huge admirer of your work." There you go, that's a nice one.
Oh, thank you.
Another comment here from Mingdom says he remembers Easton from the Club RSX days. There you go.
Yeah, that would be American. RSX is, they call it the RSX in America. We call it the new Integra in Australia.
Yeah, I love how cars have different names all over the world. Gary Monroe asks, what's one big thing that caused an issue early in your car shooting career that has made you change the way you shoot now? Is there anything that you've learned from mistakes,
really.
or you always just been perfect?
I think my only regret I have is I wish I started video sooner.
Video, right?
That would be my only regret. Yeah, I've picked up video over the last couple of years, but I wish I started it sooner, because as in many industries, photographers are videographers now. They have to be.
The fusion of that world has happened.
That's right. Yeah, especially right now where the kind of shoots and the jobs you do, you still need to do a lot of motion on the side with it, with social media campaigns and digital content. Stills and motion sort of goes hand in hand with one another. But I wish I had some opportunities in 2014, 2015 that I passed on that I wish I didn't, because I was sort of just too polite to say, to just do motion, whereas I should have just stuck my neck straight in and did it, just outsourced.
Just went for it. Let's look at a few more of your images. You got a current favorite on your portfolio there? I know you said you like the Lewis stuff, but
yeah, look, I love shooting industrial stuff. Like that's just really, really cool. Like we talk about boys' toys. This is boys' toys as well.
Yeah. And who's that shot for? That's not a commercial. Is that more kind of brochure type
that's
work?
for Hitachi. That's for Hitachi themselves. I think it must be a different photo that I didn't put on my portfolio, but in one of these you can see a tiny bird just as a reference for how massive this thing was. But if you look at the cockpit, that's essentially like a small room. You can see the ladder over here on the right hand side. This machine had operated for 80,000 work hours, which is like a testament to the reliability of Hitachi as a brand, making these kinds of machines. And so they really wanted this one photographed. So they flew us all the way to Queensland, and then we road tripped many hours to get to the mining site where this excavator was, just to photograph it, because it had so many work hours under it. It became this...
Just to celebrate it?
Yeah, it's just to celebrate it for Hitachi as a brand.
Yeah, I guess you could probably fit any of your cars inside that bucket, right?
Oh yeah. The thing is absolutely gigantic. I think it's like a Toyota Hilux, like a classic Toyota Hilux of the excavator world. It's just indestructible.
Just never die. You can't kill it even if you wanted to.
You can't. It's unkillable.
Yeah. Let's see what else you've got in your portfolio there on that portfolio page.
These are my passion projects. I love combining fashion with automotive. It is very technically and creatively challenging. And I think that's something that I like being unique to my work, is that I love combining fashion with automotive so much. It's such a weird combination, and it doesn't have much commercial it's not commercially applicable that much, but I just love doing it just because I think it looks cool, and I love the contrast and the union of the two elements. But yeah, it's you don't see a lot of it done well out there in the world, because it's very, very hard, composition wise, to combine people with cars, both in terms of compositional space as well as lighting as well.
True. We've had lots of conversations here on SmugMug Live over the last few months about the importance of personal projects, and how you want to create a body of work and shoot for yourself to show your clients what you're capable for, and hopefully draw clients that like that type of work. and it's obviously no different for yourself. The only thing I would ask you is, on a personal project in your genre, you're trying to source cars that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So how do you go about sourcing cars for your personal projects?
Well, I think the best way I can answer that is like going back to how I started in photography. I didn't have those connections. I didn't have the name back then. I didn't have the friends and the network to, source exotic cars like I do today. So I just photographed my friend's, old basic white V20. I wouldn't use a swear word, but I wouldn't say it on live, but it's a basic white, ugly Toyota Camry, and I didn't photograph any cool cars back then. Obviously having good cars works, but the sourcing cool cars, really, it just comes down to likes at the end of the day on social media, not really so much when it comes to being a car photographer and building up your portfolio to show actual professional clients. But right now, personal work, on the topic of personal work, it's incredibly important with car photography. I love doing personal work because the formula, at least for me, much of it is you do your personal work shooting, an AMG or an Aston Martin going sideways on a racetrack or something like that. And you do that as a personal work to show clients. And then those clients are like, oh, I love that guy's photo of the Aston Martin going sideways on the racetrack. He's the perfect guy to hire to photograph our basic white appliance car, hatchback thing in a car. I'm not going to say any brands or any names or anything like that, but it's like, he's the perfect guy to photograph our new A to B runabout, boring.
You're being very diplomatic.
Van or car, or you know what I mean? Like it's
no, it's so important.
The big jobs are to photograph the more mundane cars. So it's a working formula for me to do personal projects, shooting whatever you want, and then people look at that and your clients are like, oh wow, that's really cool, and then they hire you to shoot their vehicle because they want you to apply as much of that excitement and passion in cars into and instill it in their product.
Yeah, it's and it goes for any genre of photography. That's the same process no matter what you're shooting, whether it's makeup, models, fashion, cars, trains, planes, automobiles, whatever it may be. That same, passion projects and personal projects are so important. Difficult to do, and sometimes difficult to finance, depending on the genre.
Even the very best car photographers in the world do passion projects. Yep. They do personal projects. They all do.
Yeah. Right. Let's fire. We've got some questions coming here, so I'm conscious of the time. So let's fire through a couple of these. A man asks, what strategies should newbies implement to get traction and create business opportunities? I think we just mentioned it. Personal projects, passion projects would definitely be one of them. Anything else?
The new thing these days is that social media now is really, really a factor. In the early days, it doesn't matter how many followers you have on Instagram. Instagram didn't even exist, but these days, social media is really important. A lot of clients, new clients, even in agencies, will find you through social media.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see what else we have here. Tom Wood asks, how do you achieve the light, that ethereal look that you have to your images, e.g. the Lewis Hamilton shoot, especially the interior ones, even the one with the big excavator there, you definitely have this kind of glow, this ethereal look about them.
I like
maybe you can go to that image of Lewis, maybe.
Oh, that, yeah. This one was just simply because the weather was just absolutely hype. It belted down with rain, heavy rain, 5 seconds after I took that photo. The ethereal look, I think, comes down. It's definitely coming down to retouching. I like to soften the edges a little bit more. It's kind of like in Instagram, you can sort of turn up the structure to enhance clarity. I like to go in the opposite direction sometimes.
Interesting.
So, but at the same time, you don't want to lose sharpness. So you kind of need to do it selectively, if that makes sense. That's probably the best way I could use to describe it. Usually I try to do it as much in camera as possible with the help of haze and smoke machines. That does it best. That gives you that volumetric lighting. A little trick I do when it comes to shooting machinery is that people don't see is that I like to use other machinery around to kick up dust and dirt to, further upwind to create that in-camera volumetric lighting as much as I can.
It's very clever use of the tools you have around you. If you have a big excavator that can throw up a bunch of dust,
you can see on the bucket. There's a little bit of that dusty glow. That was because I was telling him to shake the bucket for me, because as he shakes it, being so massive, this dust, which just ends up looking like haze and debris from so far away and so large, that's what softens the light.
So you'll be in communication with these drivers and stuff to position them, and
is really important on these kinds of shoots, especially. So we had directors and everything all around just to take point.
Yeah, but it means you can ask them to just tilt it, move it, adjust it ever so slightly, and throw up some dust if you need it. That's cool.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, cool. Gary Monroe asks, do you have any interest in shooting Mad Max style vehicles as a personal project?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That sounds fantastic. I did a road trip to Broken Hill, which was the original Mad Max 2 location. It was an 18-hour non-stop road trip there, and we had some V8. We had 3 V8s with us. But when we got there, it was all green because we had record rain that year, the season before. So everything just all turned green. It wasn't Mad Max style, but that kind of stuff is right up my alley. I would love to do something like that. But to organize the logistics of Mad Max style vehicles and to just be in a desert in Australia, I know in the United States, deserts, like for instance, Las Vegas is surrounded by deserts, and California as well. Deserts are much more accessible there. In Australia, the nearest desert is so far away. It's a massive drive. Like I said, the nearest desert for us, I had to drive 18 hours from where I live just to get to one, only to have encountered, greenery anyway. But no, that's definitely something to keep in mind for the future.
Yeah, that's cool. Here's another question. John Brown says, it's not a question, it's a statement. We should put you together with Bella Kotak, another one of our ambassadors, who's an incredible,
I love her work.
Conceptual fashion photographer. Could you imagine her making one of these incredible costumes and staging a shoot with an incredible car?
I think she could shoot the car as well. I don't think she needs me. I think she'd be able to handle it all. Actually, maybe I don't want her going near a car because then she'd just be taking all my work.
But maybe
what she could do on people, I can't imagine what she'd be able to do on cars. It would be so good.
Incredible. But maybe you could do the fire. Maybe you could put the fire around it. Do you have any of your fire images?
I'll be happy just to assist her. That'll be okay.
Do you have any of your fire images on that portfolio there? The ones where you do the ring of fire?
No, that's such a niche stuff. I try not to. It doesn't last very long in terms of interest on my portfolio, I don't think.
Yeah. Oh, there's one.
Yeah, I did this in 2012. It's relatively common now to do if the website loads up for me. Yeah.
I think you just got that as a thumbnail, maybe.
My Wi-Fi is not doing very well at the moment. But if it loads up, it loads up. But I shot this in 2012, and I see fire images, a lot now. And then I realized, oh, hang on, that's right. I did a tutorial on it with Pro EDU. So
you set the trend and then taught everybody how to do it. That's the trick.
Well, no, Von Wong was one of the very early guys that did it on the car, but it was a French photographer. I can't pronounce his name. I wish I could give him credit right now, but it was a French photographer that did the firewall trick with the rope years before this. But yeah, like now everyone does love playing with fire in cars.
Yeah, Ben Von Wong, another great SmugMug ambassador, which we've been honoured to have on SmugMug Live. You can catch that on this show. I'm conscious that we're at the top of the hour and we both have commitments we need to get to. You, I think, maybe going back to bed because you got up so early. But
I have a huge commitment to go back to bed.
Now that you're full of coffee and donuts, you're going to go back to bed. Before we say our final thanks to Easton, I'm just going to ask you a favour. If you could hit that subscribe button for me, hit that little bell notification. That way you'll hear about all the shows we have produced here at SmugMug Live. Give us a like here on the channel if you've enjoyed our conversation with Easton, and thank you for supporting the channel. Easton, thank you so much for getting up so early. It really was above and beyond. Thank you for doing that.
It's no problem.
yeah.
I'm happy to do that for you, Alistair.
Oh.
Thanks so much for having me, though. Like, just to be amongst all those other great SmugMuggers.
It's cool, man. We love your
It's an honor
work.
to be here.
No, we love your work, and we're all very jealous of all the cool cars and airplanes and excavators you get to play with. But hopefully we get together soon once we can start traveling around the world. But thank you. Maybe we can encourage you to come back here and look at some more of your portfolio, get some more questions, maybe look at some of your gear, some of the cameras and stuff that you use. When we could do that in another episode, I would love to do that. So thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, wherever you are in the world, look after yourselves, stay safe. We'll see you back here next week on SmugMug Live. And yeah, be good, be kind to each other, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Thanks, Easton. Take care.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye, everyone.